The distress beacon shrieked through the void like a dying star, and Captain Ryan Garrett slammed his fist on the console to kill the sound. His cargo hauler wasn't built for rescue missions, but the signal came from less than 2,000 kilometers out, and maritime law still meant something even this far from Earth. "Patch me through," he barked at his co-pilot, Lucia Martinez, who was already working the communications array with hands that moved too fast for comfort. "It's not responding," Lucia said, her voice tight. "The beacon's automated. Whatever sent it is either dead or dying," Ryan finished. He was already changing course, the hauler's engines groaning under the sudden shift. "Get the airlock prepped. If there's anyone alive out there, we've got maybe 20 minutes before the cold gets them." The wreckage came into view like a broken tooth against the black. Some kind of transport vessel split clean down the middle, venting atmosphere in pale wisps that froze instantly into glittering clouds. No markings he recognized. Alien manufacture, definitely. But the design was strange even by Coalition standards. "Life signs?" Ryan asked. Lucia's face went pale. "One, faint. But Ryan, there's something else. There are 3 other ships nearby. They're not moving." "Who are they?" "Vrelic merchants," she said, and the name alone made Ryan's jaw clench. The Vrelic were known for 2 things: trading anything to anyone, and leaving problems to die in vacuum. "They're just sitting there?" Ryan demanded. "Watching," Lucia confirmed. "They're not jamming us, but they're not helping either." Ryan didn't waste time asking why. He already knew. The hauler shuddered as he brought it alongside the wreckage, matching the slow tumble. Through the viewport, he could see into the torn hull, and his breath caught. A girl. Maybe 16, maybe younger. It was hard to tell with the Vrelic physiology. Her lower body was twisted at an angle that made his stomach turn, clearly paralyzed, and her skin had already started to turn the blue-gray of deep cold exposure. She wasn't moving, but her eyes were open, tracking the hauler's approach with an expression that looked horribly, painfully aware. "Those bastards," Lucia whispered. "They left her." "Suit up," Ryan said, already moving toward the airlock. "We're bringing her in." "Ryan, we don't have medical equipment for a Vrelic. We don't even know if our atmosphere is Zen." "Then we figure it out," he snapped, pulling his helmet on. "I'm not leaving a kid to freeze because her own people decided she wasn't worth the cargo space." The airlock cycled, and Ryan pushed himself into the void, his tether line snapping taut as he crossed the gap. The girl's eyes found him immediately wide and terrified and so desperately hopeful it made his chest hurt. He reached her in seconds, his gloved hands finding purchase on the twisted metal around her. Her lips were moving, forming words he couldn't hear, but he didn't need to. He knew what she was saying. "Please." "I've got you," Ryan said, knowing she couldn't hear him either. "I've got you, kid. You're not dying today." Ryan's arms burned as he pulled the girl free from the wreckage, her body limp and cold against his suit. The metal had folded around her like a cage, and every movement sent fresh debris spinning into the void. Her breathing was shallow, visible only by the faint fog that escaped her lips, and he knew they were running out of time. "Lucia, I need the medical bay prepped now," he said through the calm, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "Whatever heat we can generate, blankets, anything." "Already on it," Lucia replied. "But Ryan, the Vrelic ships are moving. They're closing in." Of course they were. Ryan kicked off from the wreckage. The girl secured against his chest and fired his suit thrusters in short, controlled bursts. The hauler's airlock was 30 meters away, but it might as well have been 30 kilometers with 3 Vrelic vessels bearing down on them. The comm crackled. A new voice, harsh and clicking, filled his helmet. "Human vessel, you are interfering with Vrelic cultural practices. Return the defective cargo, immediately. Defective cargo." Ryan's vision went red, but he kept moving, kept his trajectory clean. "This is a sentient being in distress," he said, his tone ice. "Maritime law supersedes your cultural practices. The damaged one cannot contribute," the Vrelic voice insisted. "She is resource expenditure with no return. We made the logical choice." You are acting irrationally. Ryan reached the airlock, Lucia already cycling it open from inside. He pushed the girl through first, following immediately, and the moment the seal engaged, he ripped his helmet off. Logical choice, he shouted at the comm panel. You left a kid to die because she couldn't work anymore? Lucia was already beside the girl, cutting away the frozen sections of her clothing, wrapping her in thermal blankets. The girl's eyes were still open, still aware, and Ryan could see the terror in them mixing with something else. Confusion, maybe. Like she couldn't understand why these strangers were helping her. Ryan, they're powering weapons, Lucia said quietly. He moved to the cockpit, his hands finding the controls by muscle memory. The hauler wasn't armed. Not really. A few mining lasers, some cargo clamps, nothing built for combat. But he'd been hauling freight through contested space for 15 years, and he knew how to make a ship dance. Human, this is your final warning, the Vrelic voice said. Return our property or be destroyed. Ryan's finger hovered over the engine ignition. She's not property, and you're not getting her back. The first shot came before he finished speaking, a plasma bolt that scorched past the hauler's port side close enough to make the hull groan. Ryan slammed the throttle forward, the G-force crushing him back into his seat as the hauler shot away from the wreckage field. The girl cried out behind him, a sound of pure pain, and Lucia's voice rose over it. She's hypothermic and going into shock. I need you to keep the ship steady. Working on it, Ryan grunted, throwing the hauler into a hard roll as two more shots burned through the space they'd just occupied. The Vrelic ships were faster, more maneuverable. Built for hunting pirates and claim jumpers, his hauler was built for carrying ore and keeping a low profile. But Ryan Garrett hadn't survived this long by fighting fair. He dove toward the nearby asteroid field, the dense cluster of rock and ice that formed the system's outer belt. The Vrelic ships followed, their weapons tracking, and Ryan counted down in his head. 3 seconds. 2. 1. He cut the engines entirely. Momentum carried the hauler forward. But without thrust signature, they vanished from standard sensors. The Vrelic ships overshot, their plasma cannons firing into empty space, and by the time they corrected, Ryan had the hauler tucked behind a spinning chunk of nickel iron 300 meters across. You cannot hide forever, human, the Vrelic's voice said. Your ship has limited fuel, limited supplies. The damaged one requires medical care you cannot provide. Surrender her now, and we will allow you to leave. Ryan looked back at the girl. Lucia had gotten her core temperature stabilizing, but her lower body was still motionless, the paralysis obvious even under the blankets. Her eyes met his, and he saw something in them he recognized, the same thing he'd seen in the mirror after his own daughter had died, after the doctors had told him there was nothing more they could do. The look of someone who'd already accepted they were going to die. Not happening. Ryan said into the comm. He turned to Lucia. How long until we can jump? 10 minutes to charge the drive, she said. But Ryan, even if we make it out of this system, what then? She needs a hospital, specialized care. Then we find one, Ryan interrupted. We find someone who can help her. But we're not giving her back to people who think she's garbage because she can't walk. The girl's hand moved, slow and trembling, reaching toward him. Her lips formed a word in Vrelic that the hauler's translator picked up. Why? Ryan knelt beside her, his hand closing gently around hers. Because you're a person, he said simply, and people don't leave each other to die. The jump drive hummed to life with a sound like grinding teeth, and Ryan knew they wouldn't make it to full charge before the Vrelic found them. The asteroid provided cover, but his ship's heat signature was climbing every second, and their pursuers weren't stupid. 6 minutes to jump capacity, Lucia called out, her hands steady on the girl despite the tension crackling through the cockpit. Her vitals are improving, but she's fighting me. I think she's trying to talk. Ryan kept his eyes on the sensor display, watching 3 red dots weave through the asteroid field in a search pattern. They were getting closer, tightening the net. Keep her calm. Last thing we need is her going into cardiac arrest while we're dodging plasma fire. The Vrelic voice returned, sickeningly patient now. Human vessel, you demonstrate the irrational attachment your species is known for. This emotional response will cost you your life. The defective one is not worth your sacrifice. Ryan's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He'd heard variations of this speech before, from corporate executives who'd written off colony disasters as acceptable losses, from military brass who'd traded lives for strategic advantages. The words changed, but the rot underneath stayed the same. "Lucia," he said quietly. "How much charge do we need for a micro-jump?" She looked up sharply. 30% minimum, but Ryan, a micro-jump in an asteroid field is suicide. We could materialize inside solid rock. Or we could materialize behind them, he countered. The drive was at 42% now, climbing agonizingly slow. Plot a jump vector, 200 kilometers, directly through this asteroid's mass. Lucia's eyes went wide. That's impossible. The calculations alone? Already running, Ryan said, fingers flying across his console. I've been mapping this field since we arrived. The asteroid's rotation is predictable. If we time it right, we jump through the gap and come out in their blind spot. If we time it wrong, we're paced. Lucia shot back, but she was already running the numbers. Behind her, the girl made a soft sound, and Lucia glanced down. She's trying to say something. Ryan didn't take his eyes off the sensors. The Vrelic ships had split up, boxing them in. 58 seconds until the closest one had a firing solution. What's she saying? I think. Lucia's voice caught. I think she's telling us to leave her, to save ourselves. Something cold and sharp twisted in Ryan's chest. He remembered his daughter's last words, remembered her telling him it was okay to let go, that he'd done enough. He'd failed her then. He wouldn't fail this kid now. Tell her no, he said firmly. Tell her that's not how humans work. The drive hit 60%. Good enough. Ryan's hands moved without conscious thought, engaging the jump sequence while simultaneously firing the mining lasers in a widespread. The beams carved through smaller asteroids, sending debris scattering in every direction, flooding the sensors with false contacts. Jump in, 3, he announced. 2. The Vrelic ship appeared from behind an ice chunk, weapons hot targeting lock screaming. Plasma built in its forward cannons, enough to vaporize the hauler in a single shot. 1. Reality twisted. The universe folded itself inside out, and Ryan's stomach tried to climb out through his throat. For a fraction of a heartbeat, they existed in two places simultaneously. And then the hauler snapped back into normal space with a jolt that sent everything not bolted down flying. They'd cleared the asteroid. They were 200 kilometers from where they'd started, and the 3 Vrelic ships were still searching the debris field they'd just created. Jump drive at 18% and falling, Lucia reported, her voice shaking. We just burned through most of our charge with that stunt. Then we make it count, Ryan said, already plotting the next move. Full burn toward the heliopause. We need distance before they reacquire us. The hauler's engines roared, pushing them toward the system's edge. Ryan could feel the ship protesting, every rivet and weld straining under the acceleration. Behind them, the Vrelic ships would figure out what happened any second now. The girl's hand suddenly gripped Lucia's arm with surprising strength. Her eyes were clearer now, focused. And when she spoke, the translator rendered her words in a weak but determined voice. They will not stop, she said. Vrelic do not accept loss of property. They will hunt you across sectors. Your life is forfeit for taking me. Ryan glanced back at her. Good thing I'm already living on borrowed time then. You do not understand, the girl insisted, struggling to sit up despite Lucia's protests. I am worthless. Damaged. My spine was severed in the crash. I will never walk again. Among my people, I am already dead. You risk everything for nothing. You're not nothing, Lucia said fiercely, pressing the girl back down. And your people are wrong, the sensor screamed. All 3 Vrelic ships had changed course, burning hard in pursuit. They were faster, much faster, and the gap was closing at a rate that made Ryan's blood run cold. Jump drive at 12%, Lucia said. We're not going to make it. Ryan's mind raced through options, discarding them as fast as they formed. They couldn't outrun the Vrelic. Couldn't outfight them. Couldn't hide. The only thing left was the one play nobody expected. Lucia, pull up every emergency frequency in this sector, he ordered. What are you doing? Something stupid, Ryan admitted. He opened a wideband transmission, broadcasting on every channel simultaneously. This is the human cargo vessel Atlas, to all ships in range. I am transporting a Vrelic refugee who was abandoned to die by her own people. I am being pursued by 3 Vrolic warships, who are attempting to murder a paralyzed miner rather than accept she survived. I am requesting immediate assistance under maritime law and transmitting my coordinates now. Silence. The void offered nothing back, except the steadily approaching Vrelic ships. Then, like stars igniting in the darkness, new contacts bloomed on the sensors. 6 ships, 10, 20, human vessels, Coalition cruisers, even a Turian heavy freighter. Every ship within range was changing course, burning toward them. You just started an international incident, Lucia breathed. Ryan smiled grimly. Yeah, I really did. The Vrelic ships broke off pursuit the moment the Coalition cruiser Meridian dropped out of jump space, its weapons arrays hot and tracking. 20. 3 vessels formed a loose perimeter around the Atlas, and Ryan finally let himself breathe. Human vessel Atlas. This is Commander Patricia Hayes of the Coalition cruiser Meridian. A crisp voice cut through the comm. Stand down your engines and prepare to be boarded for medical assistance and debriefing. Ryan cut the throttle, letting the hauler drift. Acknowledged, Meridian. We have 1 Vrelic miner aboard. Critical condition. Paralyzed and recovering from severe hypothermia. She needs immediate medical attention. Understood. Medical team is already suited up. There was a pause. Atlas, be advised that the Vrelic Consortium is filing formal protests with the Coalition Council. They're claiming you committed theft of property and violated their sovereignty. Property, Ryan repeated, the word tasting like poison. They left a kid to freeze in space because she couldn't walk anymore. I read your transmission, Hayes said, and her voice had gone cold in a way that made Ryan think she understood perfectly. Medical team launching now. Sit tight. The girl had gone quiet, her eyes tracking everything with an intensity that worried Ryan more than panic would have. Lucia kept checking her vitals, but the numbers were holding steady, stable, at least for now. What is your name? Ryan asked, crouching beside her. The girl's throat worked, struggling with the human phonetics. Kalira, she finally managed. I am Kalira Vasfelth, apprentice navigator of the merchant vessel Dawn Prophet. Her mouth twisted bitterly. I was Kalira Vasfelth. You still are, Lucia said firmly. No. Kalira's voice was flat, dead. I am nothing now. Vrelic, who cannot work, are Vrelic who do not exist. This has always been the way. Ryan felt anger building in his chest again, hot and sharp. Well, it's a garbage way, and whoever decided it was brilliant needs to be launched out an airlock. Kalira's eyes widened slightly. You do not understand our culture. Efficiency is survival. Resources are finite. The strong carry the weak only until carrying becomes drowning. This is logic. It's cruelty dressed up in logic's clothes, Ryan shot back. And I've met plenty of people who use the same excuse. Doesn't make it right. The airlock cycled, and 4 Coalition medical personnel floated through, led by a compact woman with surgeon's hands and calculating eyes. She took one look at Kiliar and started barking orders, her team moving with practiced efficiency. Spinal trauma, advanced hypothermia, possible internal bleeding, the surgeon muttered, running a scanner over Kalira's body. How long was she in vacuum? Maybe 20 minutes before we got to her, Ryan said. The surgeon's eyebrows climbed. And she's alive? Tough kid. She looked at Kaliara directly. I'm Dr. Sarah Flynn. We're taking you to the Meridian's medical bay. Can you tell me where it hurts? Kalira stared at her like she'd spoken in ancient Sumerian. Why are you asking me? I am damaged. Dispose of me efficiently. Flynn's expression went absolutely glacial. Yeah, that's not how we do things. Now where does it hurt? Everywhere, Kalira whispered. and suddenly she looked exactly like what she was, a terrified teenager who'd been left to die by everyone she'd ever known. Everything hurts. Then we'll fix what we can and manage what we can't, Flynn said simply. Let's move her. They transferred Kalira to a medical pod with careful precision, and Ryan watched the pod seal, watched it drift back toward the Meridian, escorted by 2 of Flynn's team. Something in his chest loosened slightly. She was safe, for now. Captain Garrett, Hayes' voice returned. I need you and your co-pilot aboard the Meridian for debriefing. The Relic are demanding we turn Kalira over to them, and frankly, this situation is about to get very complicated, very fast. Ryan and Lucia exchanged glances. On our way, Ryan said. The Meridian's debriefing room was sterile and efficient, and Commander Hayes looked like someone who'd been designed specifically to intimidate junior officers. She gestured them to seats and pulled up a holographic display showing the wreckage, the Varelic ships, and the Atlas's flight path. Doc, she said. Ryan did, laying out everything from the distress beacon to Kalira's condition to the Varelic's threats. Hayes listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, the Varelic Consortium is claiming Kalira was lawfully abandoned according to their cultural practices. They're saying she was given the option of euthanasia and refused, so she forfeited any claim to resources or rescue. She's 16, Lucia said, her voice shaking with fury. By Varelic standards, she's an adult, Hayes countered, and their laws regarding disabled individuals are very clear. If you cannot contribute to the collective, you are not entitled to collective resources. Ryan leaned forward. So what? We just hand her back? Let them finish what they started? I didn't say that, Hayes said sharply. I said the situation is complicated. The Varelic Consortium holds significant economic power in this sector. If we grant Keeler asylum, they could impose trade sanctions, withdraw from mutual defense pacts, cause a diplomatic nightmare that affects millions of people. But if we don't, we're killing her, Ryan said. Hayes met his eyes. Yes, we are. She stood, pacing to the viewport where stars burned cold and distant. The Coalition Council will debate this for weeks. They'll form committees, run cost-benefit analyses, worry about precedent and political fallout, and while they're debating, Kalira sits in legal limbo, and the Varelic Consortium tightens the screws. So what do we do? Lucia asked. Hayes turned back, and there was something fierce in her expression now. You, nothing. You're civilians who responded to a distress call and acted in good faith under maritime law. Me? She smiled, sharp as a blade. I enforce Coalition law in this sector, and Coalition law says any sentient being requesting asylum gets a hearing. That hearing requires medical evaluation, psychological assessment, and legal representation, all of which takes time to arrange properly. Ryan understood immediately. You're stalling. I'm following procedure, Hayes corrected. Very, very thoroughly. And while I'm doing that, Dr. Flynn is going to evaluate Kalira's condition and determine what medical interventions are possible. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, Captain Garrett, it's telling the universe that impossible just means we haven't tried hard enough yet. 3 days passed in a blur of medical scans, legal depositions, and increasingly hostile messages from the Varelic Consortium. Ryan stayed aboard the Meridian, refusing to leave while Kalira's fate hung in balance. Lucia had returned to the Atlas to handle the mounting repair costs, but she called every few hours for updates. Ryan was in the observation deck when Dr. Flynn found him, her face unreadable. We need to talk about Kalira, she said, settling into the seat beside him. Through the viewport, stars streaked past as the Meridian held position at the system's edge. Ryan's stomach dropped. How bad? The spinal damage is complete, Flynn said bluntly. Severed at the thoracic 12 vertebra equivalent. By Varelic medical standards, it's irreparable. Their physiology doesn't support nerve regeneration the way some species do, and they never developed the surgical techniques to bypass the injury because, well, she gestured bitterly. They just let people like Kalira die instead. But human medical standards? Ryan pressed. Flynn's expression shifted, something cautious but bright flickering in her eyes. We've been doing spinal reconstruction for 40 years. Neural bridging, synthetic nerve grafts, cybernetic integration. It's not perfect, and it's not easy, but it's possible. She pulled up a datapad, showing him a complex surgical schematic. The procedure would take 8 hours, maybe 10. High risk, but Kalira's young and strong. I'd put her odds at 70% for regaining partial mobility, 40% for near full recovery. Ryan felt hope ignite in his chest. So we can help her. Technically, yes, Flynn said. Practically, there's a problem. The surgery costs 200,000 credits, requires specialized equipment we'd need to requisition from Earth, and would take 6 weeks to schedule. And that's assuming the Coalition Council approves asylum before the Verlek Consortium's political pressure forces us to hand her over. Which they won't, Ryan said flatly. Which they won't, Flynn confirmed. I've seen the preliminary reports. The Council's leaning toward appeasement. Too many trade agreements at stake. Too much economic leverage on the Vrelek side. She paused. There's talk of a compromise. Voluntary return to Vrelek space in exchange for assurances of humane treatment. Humane treatment, Ryan repeated. They left her to freeze. I know, Flynn said quietly. But politicians don't see a kid when they look at this situation. They see trade routes and profit margins and re-election campaigns. Ryan stared out at the stars, feeling fury and helplessness war in his gut. Can I see her? That's actually why I'm here, Flynn said. She's been asking for you. Kalira was in a private medical bay, her lower body still immobilized, but her color vastly improved from the blue-gray corpse he'd pulled from the wreckage. She looked up when Ryan entered, and something complicated crossed her face. You are still here, she said. Where else would I be? Away, Kalira said simply. You rescued me. The debt is paid. Continuing to involve yourself is inefficient. Ryan pulled up a chair, settling beside her bed. Yeah, well, I'm not great at efficiency. Kalira studied him with those large, dark eyes. I have been researching humans, she said abruptly. Your species is strange. You form attachments to creatures that provide no economic benefit. You expend resources on art and music that serve no survival function. You risk your lives for strangers who cannot repay the debt. Guilty on all counts, Ryan said. Why? Kalira asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. The Vrelek way is logical. We survive because we make hard choices, because we do not waste resources on sentiment. But humans, she gestured helplessly, humans thrive despite rejecting logic at every turn. How? Ryan was quiet for a moment, thinking about his daughter, about the 2 years he'd spent fighting for her life even when every doctor said it was hopeless. Thinking about the money he'd spent, the career he'd abandoned, the sanity he'd nearly lost, all for 6 more months with her, before the cancer finally won. Maybe we don't see it as waste, he said finally. Maybe we think the things that make life worth living are exactly the things that can't be reduced to profit margins and efficiency reports. But you suffer for it, Kalira said. I have read about human psychology. You experience grief, loss, emotional trauma from your attachments. Would it not be easier to simply not care? Yeah, Ryan admitted. It would be easier. But it wouldn't be living. It'd just be surviving, and there's a difference. Kalira looked away. The Vrelek Consortium has demanded my return. I heard the doctors talking. They believe your Coalition Council will comply within days. Flynn told you about the surgery? Ryan asked. Yes. Kalira's voice went flat again. She explained that human medicine could repair my spine, restore my mobility. She made it sound almost possible. It is possible. No, Kalira said. It is expensive and time-consuming, and requires resources that will not be allocated to damaged Vrelek property. This is logic, Captain Garrett. This is reality. Ryan leaned forward. Tell me something, Kalira. If you could choose, if money and politics and all the rest didn't matter, would you want the surgery? Kalira's hands clenched in the sheets. Wanting is irrelevant. That's not an answer. Yes, she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. Yes, I would want to walk again. I would want to navigate stars and plot courses and prove I am more than my injury. I would want... Her voice broke. But wanting changes nothing. Ryan stood abruptly. Stay here. I am paralyzed, Kalira said dryly. Where would I go? Ryan was already moving, his mind spinning through possibilities, discarding the impossible and focusing on the merely insane. He found Commander Hayes in her office, surrounded by holographic reports and looking like she hadn't slept in days. I need a favor, Ryan said without preamble. Hayes looked up exhausted. Darrett, if this is about Kalira's asylum claim, it's about the surgery, Ryan interrupted. Flynn says it costs 200,000 credits and 6 weeks of scheduling. I can get you the money. Hayes blinked. You have 200,000 credits? No, Ryan admitted, but I have a ship worth about that much. Sell the Atlas, use the funds for Kalira's surgery. Garrett, that's your livelihood, and she's a kid who deserves a chance, Ryan shot back. I can find another ship, another job. She can't find another life. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then, the money isn't the only problem. Even if we fund the surgery privately, the Council's decision still stands. If they order her returned to Vrelic space, we're legally obligated to comply, surgery or not. Ryan's jaw set. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. And how exactly do we do that? Ryan smiled, sharp and reckless. We make Kalira's story so public, so visible, that the Council can't quietly sweep her away. We turn her into a symbol. We make the whole galaxy watch, and we dare the Council to choose profit over principle while everyone's looking. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then slowly started to smile. You want to start a media war? I want to fight dirty, Ryan corrected. Because the Vrelic sure as hell are. The interview went live on every major network simultaneously, and within 6 hours, Kalira's face was on screens across 36 systems. Ryan had expected some response. He hadn't expected the galaxy to lose its collective mind. The first wave came from human colonies, naturally. Footage of Kalira being pulled from the wreckage, her paralyzed body wrapped in emergency blankets, played on loop. But it was her own words, translated and broadcast in 40 languages, that turned sympathy into fury. They told me I'd become inefficient, Kalira said to the camera, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That my injury meant I had no value. They gave me a choice, injection for a quick death or abandonment in the wreckage. I chose to live. I do not know if that was brave or foolish. The interviewer, a sharp human journalist named Kate Russo, leaned forward. What do you want people to know? Kalira had looked directly at the camera. That I wanted to live. That I still want to live? That being broken does not mean being worthless, no matter what my people believe. The Vrelic Consortium's official response came within hours, dismissing the interview as emotional manipulation and demanding the Coalition honor their extradition request. But by then, protests had erupted outside Vrelic embassies on 15 worlds. Human disability rights groups were organizing boycotts. Even other alien species were weighing in, some supporting the Varric position, others condemning it. The Coalition Council, Ryan noted with grim satisfaction, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Commander Hayes found him in the Meridian's mess hall 3 days after the broadcast. She dropped into the seat across from him, looking simultaneously exhausted and triumphant. The Council voted an hour ago, she said. Kalira's asylum claim has been approved. The Vrelic Consortium is being told to pound sand. Ryan felt something unclench in his chest. And the surgery? Scheduled for tomorrow morning, Hayes said. Your ship sale went through faster than expected, and we got donations from about 10,000 people who saw the interview. There's enough money for the surgery and another year of physical therapy after. She paused. There's also enough to buy you a new ship. Nothing fancy, but functional. Ryan shook his head, put it toward Kalira's recovery. I'll figure out the ship situation. Already done, Hayes said. The donations specified very specifically that funds were for both Kalira's medical care and to replace your vessel. People were pretty insistent about it. Jack slid a data pad across the table. Congratulations, Garrett. You're officially a hero, which I'm told is extremely annoying. Ryan looked at the numbers on the datapad and felt his throat tighten. I just picked up a distress signal. You started an interstellar incident and changed asylum law for 3 sectors, Hayes corrected. But sure, let's call it picking up a distress signal. The surgery took 11 hours. Ryan spent all of them in the waiting area, pacing and drinking terrible coffee and trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. Lucia had returned to the Meridian and sat with him, her presence steady and grounding. When Dr. Flynn finally emerged, she was smiling. "The nerve grafts took," she said. "Synthetic connections are integrating well. It'll be months before we know the full extent of recovery, but initial responses are promising. She's asking for you, by the way." Kalira was pale and groggy, but her eyes focused when Ryan entered. "Did it work?" she asked immediately. "Too early to tell for sure," Ryan said, settling into the bedside chair that had become familiar. "But Flynn's optimistic." Kalira was quiet for a moment. "Then, I felt my toes during the final neural test. Just for a second, but I felt them." Her voice cracked. "I had forgotten what that felt like." "That's a good sign," Ryan said, his own voice rough. "Captain Garrett," Kelly Red said formally, and there was something determined in her expression now. "I have a question." "Shoot." "When I recover, if I recover, I will need employment. The Vrelic Consortium has disowned me, so I cannot return to navigation work with them." She paused. "You sold your ship to save me. When you obtain a new vessel, you will need a navigator." Ryan blinked. "Kalira, you don't owe me." "This is not about debt," she interrupted. "This is about wanting. You asked me what I wanted, and I am telling you I want to navigate. I want to plot courses through stars. I want to prove that broken things can still be useful, still have purpose." Her eyes met his, fierce and alive. "I want to crew on a ship where the captain believes that." Ryan felt something warm expand in his chest. "You're hired," he said, "assuming you pass your medical clearance." "I will pass," Kalira said with absolute certainty. "Humans have taught me that impossible only means we have not tried hard enough yet." 6 months later, Ryan stood on the bridge of his new ship, smaller than the Atlas but faster, sleeker, and watched Kalira ease into the navigator's station. She moved with careful precision, her legs still weak but functional, the braces she wore hidden beneath her uniform. "Coordinates locked," Kalira reported, her fingers dancing across the console with the confidence of someone who'd been born to this work. "Jump solution plotted. We have a clean run to the Orion freight lanes." Lucia, occupying the co-pilot seat, grinned. "Looks like we're actually doing this. Independent freight operation, just the three of us. Just us and whatever trouble we find along the way," Ryan agreed. He looked at Kalira. "Any regrets?" Kalira's expression was thoughtful. "The Vrelic teach that efficiency is survival, but I have learned something else." She met his eyes. "Humanity is survival. Compassion is survival. Choosing to care when logic says you should not. That is how species truly thrive." "Pretty sure you just described humans in one sentence," Lucia said. "Yes," Kalira agreed. "I suppose I did." She turned back to her console. "Ready for jump on your command, Captain." Ryan settled into his chair, feeling the rightness of this moment settle over him like a well-worn coat. A broken ship. A scarred crew. A future that looked nothing like the safe, predictable path. It was perfect. "Take us out," he said. The ship jumped.